Good morning, everyone. I am Dante Ang, President and CEO of the Manila Times. We're fortunate to have this morning the Ambassador of Israel to the Philippines, His Excellency Rafael Harpaz. Ambassador Harpaz arrived in the Philippines in August 2018. Prior to his designation as Israel's ambassador to the Philippines, he served as the director of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Central Asia and Caucasus Department since December 2015. He served as Israel's ambassador to Azerbaijan and Director of Public Affairs Department in the Embassy of Israel in Washington, D.C. He also served as Deputy Chief of Mission in the Embassy of Israel in Stockholm, Sweden, Bern, Switzerland, and Abidjan, Ivory Coast. In the ministry's head office in Jerusalem, Ambassador Harpaz served as the head of the Economic Department for Africa and America from 2009 to 2012. Welcome, Ambassador, again to the Manila Times. Thank you for agreeing to this. Before we ask you the questions we'd like to ask, or we intended to ask, Israel has been in the news. There's trouble in your country. Perhaps you can give us the latest on what's happening in Israel and in Palestine.
Okay, while we are talking, barrage of rockets are falling all over Israel, especially on the Tel Aviv region and the area around Gaza Strip, by Hamas terrorist group, which is sponsored by Iran, by Islamic Jihad. It's terrorist groups that wants the annihilation of Israel. More than 500 rockets were shot on Israel in the last 36 hours, including 137 rockets in a period of 15 minutes. Now we have the Iron Dome system that can protect us, and it actually took away 90% of the rockets, but still people are being injured, people are being killed, and Israel has the right for self-defense to protect its citizens. The Hamas is attacking Israel from civilian areas in Gaza. They attack civilians in Israel. It's a war crime. And the international community should condemn those terrorist acts. In Israel, we are 73 years old, and we're still surrounded by a terrorist group, non-state organization, which are attacking us day after day, attacking indiscriminately children, schools, and innocent civilians.
Ambassador, what triggered this latest episode? Because from my understanding, rockets have been fired toward Israel from Palestinian areas for many years now. It's going on and off. What is behind this recent episode?
First, those attacks are coming only from the Gaza Strip. And Israel left Gaza Strip already in 2005. It's not an occupied territory, nothing. But since then, Hamas is attacking Israel. It's every few months or every few years they attack us again. The goal of Hamas is not a territorial issue. It's not they just don't accept the existence of the Jewish state. This is you see the statements of Hamas. They never recognize the fact that Israel has a right to exist. This time they used the tension that was in Jerusalem, and there was some tension in Jerusalem, as a provocation. They just use the pretext, and they have those rockets. Instead of supporting their people, bringing them, strengthening their economy, fighting COVID, this is their agenda. And again, like every other country, like the Philippines was attacked in Marawi a few years ago. We have the full right to protect ourselves, and that's what we are doing. We are a strong country, but we can't accept those attacks. And it's just a provocation of Hamas, and it's a war crime.
Ambassador, have the attacks been more deadly this time? Because I remember from the past news that these attacks sometimes just they hit open areas, and so Israel has been trying to restrain itself. But there's been some deaths now.
Yeah, just a few minutes ago, 2 women died in the city of Lud, near the international airport in Tel Aviv. It aims directly. By the way, it's not justified also to send any rocket to Israel, but it hits directly the big centers of population of Israel. And there's not one other country in the world that would agree for this. So they went aggressively. They initiated it. And now we are responding. And we are responding, by the way, and we try to prevent as much as we can any civilian people to be killed, in difference from them that they are targeting intentionally our citizens. This is the bottom line.
Well, Ambassador, how do you think this will play out? Because I think I've heard your president say that they're even considering airstrikes to retaliate. What do you think will happen?
Well, we are fighting a terrorist group, so they are unpredictable. You can't, they can be. Israel will do whatever necessary to protect itself, and we have to make sure that Hamas will be totally retaliated, and will think twice and three times before he's initiating any kind of a terrorist attack, a terror attack against. But it's an equation that we think logically. We are, Philippines is a state, Israel is a state. This is a terrorist group sponsored by Iran, so they have a state-sponsored organization, and the way of thinking is different from ours. And this is a major challenge. And again, all the life are disrupted in Israel for the last 48 hours. And we will do whatever we can to protect our citizens. We can't accept it. Nobody would accept it. And when you're being attacked, you have to defend yourself, and that's what we do. And we need to take care of the roots of this terrorism, this hatred against Israel. And what we saw in the last few years is almost full acceptance of Israel in the Arab world. We have, relations with the Emirates, breakthrough, with Bahrain, with Egypt, with Jordan, with Morocco, with many other countries. It's a new world, but the terrorist group still stayed behind, and they still think in the old terminology that we knew for tens of years ago.
How do you think this will impact? There have been some initiatives to have some peace talks, right, with the Palestinians. This is definitely a setback, but how can we get back on track, or does Israel want to get back on track?
Yeah, in general, Israel would like to have peaceful relations with all our neighbors. Hamas is a different story, and the Palestinian Authority is a different story. But Hamas' goal is to when you talk to someone that want to destroy you, what is there to talk to them? That's why we can talk. With the Palestinian Authority, we have talked, but this is, it's not a conflict that can be solved very easily. But the fact is that most of the Arab world recognize that bilateral relations with Israel are very important. That's why we have Israel is a strong country, advanced country, number one in COVID, taking care of COVID in the world, and that's why the world has changed, but not with this terrorist group. And I think the main source of this is really the ideology, the extreme Islamic ideology of Hamas, Islamic Jihad. A mixture with these capabilities of attacking you with missiles. That some of them are smuggled, or being from Iran or others. Some of them are being manufactured in Gaza Strip.
Well, Ambassador, you mentioned COVID. Israel has been making the news on that front as well, but in a good way. You have gotten around the crisis much earlier than most countries. Can you give us the latest developments on the pandemic situation in your country?
I just connected for a moment, with your permission, about the situation, because we vaccinated the Palestinian workers which are working in Israel. We're vaccinated by Israel, for example. Give you an example. So we give vaccinations and we get rockets on Israel. This is the equation. Just give an example. When it comes to the issue of COVID, Israel is, and again, it's very challenging for me to speak about those issues today when Israel is under a barrage of rockets. But generally, Israel is a success story. The success of Israel in, this virus, it's ups and downs. So we have to be very, very cautious with it. But generally, today in Israel, life is normal. When there is no conflict with Hamas, life is pretty normal. Until 2 days ago, schools are back, no masks outside. The success is first bringing the vaccines. We got the vaccines, we were willing first, and we were willing to start the project of inoculation first. So Israel is some kind of laboratory for the world to see how, and then we received it when the fake news were very, very strong all over the world. Second, Israel is a great public health system with a very strong HMOs. So there were days, we are 9.3 million people. There were a few days that we vaccinated 200,000 people per day. I was there in Israel, 200,000 people per day. So today, 5.5 million Israelis already been vaccinated with the first shot, and more than 5 million Israelis were vaccinated twice. FDA just approved the vaccination of children from the age of 12 to 16. We are usually following the US FDA guidelines. We have only Pfizer and Moderna, and we vaccinated the people that we vaccinated were vaccinated by Pfizer. So most of the eligible, around 80% of the eligible Israelis were vaccinated. And we already signed an agreement just a few weeks ago with Pfizer and Moderna for another 16 million doses, which will cover for 2022. And this is not for first and second shot. This is planning for a third shot, a booster with the variants. So we know that we might be among the first ones when it will, if and when there will be a booster shot. So the efficiency of the HMOs in Israel was critical in this. And I tell you how it works. You are invited to get the vaccine. It's in your neighborhood, no lines. It's all computerized. You go, you show up, you get the shot. You need to wait 15 minutes if there is any side effects. During those 15 minutes, you get a text message with an invitation for 21 days exactly for the second shot. They keep the second shot for you. You go after 21 days, you get the second shot, again you wait 15 minutes, and during those 15 minutes you get a green passport that tells you that's the day of the first one, that's the second one, the validity of it. And now we extended the validity of the inoculation. At the beginning it was only for 6 months, but now we know it's working. And it's for until the end of the year, so which means it's 1 year actually, until the end of December. We started in December, and the results are staggering. The Pfizer vaccines protect you after 28 days from start to the end. 96% of people won't get sick at all, and those that will get sick, it will be mostly asymptomatic or very mildly sick.
You mentioned that Israel has also been giving vaccines to Palestinians. Now, has that stopped now because of what's going on?
I'm not aware of it.
Has that been interrupted?
It's the last 36 hours, so I think it's those that are entering Israel receive the vaccine in order to prevent the public further. I don't know. I'm not aware of this.
Well, I hope that things will settle down in Israel, and of course, everybody deserves to live in peace.
Yeah.
I heard in your other interview, I think with ANC, you're saying that you have enough vaccines, but I think we couldn't resist. People here couldn't resist asking you whether or not Israel can share some of those with the Philippines.
Okay, well, good question.
First of all, some constraints with that, I think you said.
First, we shared it already because 30,000 Filipinos, OFWs in Israel, been vaccinated by the government of Israel.
Yes.
By the way, with no charges, it's part of their, all of them by Pfizer, approximately 30,000. In addition, we have sent during this pandemic year hundreds of students of TESTA to Israel. They've all been vaccinated. The Filipino embassy in Israel, the team, the ambassador, and all the diplomats and their families were vaccinated. So I'm very proud of it. Israel, until now, there is a request for, I think, around 20 countries to receive some vaccines from Israel as assistance, including the Philippines. And it's something that will be top priority whenever the Philippines will be definitely top priority in this region of Southeast Asia, whenever Israel will be able to give away vaccines. We didn't give any country. It has nothing to do with the Philippines due to first the contracts that we have with the pharmaceutical to a third party, and also there are legal constraints in Israel about it. So whenever it will come, the day the Philippines will be top priority, but we assisted the Philippines beside and in addition of vaccinating the tens of thousands of Filipinos in Israel, first by working very closely with the IATF about sharing our experience how Israel is dealing with the vaccination program, with public health, all those issues. This was very important. Then giving the Philippines batches of assistance. I was honored to give both to our donations to the Department of Education, distance learning material, and also to the Philippine National Police, the Department of National Defense. We were immediately from the beginning, and we are looking forward to assist whenever we can. So this is what we did until now.
Right. So what are some of those recommendations or experiences that you've shared that you think is going to make a big impact in the Philippines?
Well, I'm not in a position to give advice to the Philippines. I'll tell you what's the lessons that we have learned until now in Israel. First, one, I think we need to strengthen our health systems. this is clear. And in Israel, we succeeded in dealing, there was a lot of pressure. There were certain moments that the numbers were so high that there was enormous pressure, and we need to, like in the film, open a new corona sections in the hospitals. And we understood we need to have more doctors and more budgets and more nurses. I think this is a lesson which Israel has learned. 100%, the most, I think, critical. Second, the HMOs, the important, and again, in Israel, in difference from other countries, private sector is not involved. You can't purchase a vaccine in Israel. Impossible. It's only government. And for Israel, it works because we have a very strong, 4 HMOs. Each Israeli is a member of an HMO. That's where you get all your basic medical services, and it's worked perfectly. Third issue is, it's crucial, is the issue of the education system. If I'm looking at what a challenge for pupils to stay home for more than a year without school, without kindergarten. Now we have in Israel, we have the technology. Almost all Israeli pupils, almost, not all of them, has a computer at home, has a good access to the internet, but the emotional element here is enormous. Besides the fact that they don't go to school, they don't socialize, and we learned how we can do first school from distance, but also to do schooling in capsules. So you won't go every day to school. One day this group, the other one, this is how you are not going to transmit the disease. Another lesson that we have learned, in normal days, I was sitting in front of you, doing this interview face to face. What we have learned that we can do many things from a distance. And actually now when Israel is going out of the pandemic, we see that as a government, should we bring everybody 5 days a week to the office with traffic jams, with air pollution, with the cost, or maybe you can stay 1 day at home and guarantee that you can do your functions from home, and in many cases you can do it. So I gave you a spectrum of issues. Then the last lesson we've learned, that we have segments in our population that in cases of crisis like this, we need to give them more support. First, in all those that were unemployed, and Israel gave we never gave a package like this. And second, three major segments of our private sector: the entertainment industry, the food industry, and the tourism industry. They are the one that badly hurt. Now it's all back, not completely. Tourism is a major challenge, international one, but these are the ones that were totally, people lost all their income, and you need, in our DNA, we support people that are, not in the private sector. Private sector will manage, and now we understand, yes, we need to support those private businesses, smaller and bigger, that lost all their income, and all their employees lost their jobs for a while. That was a major challenge, and the government has to open its pockets and to have a big government deficit. Having said that, we see the economy start booming very fast in Israel. We see the economic growth, we see the collection of taxes, so it means there is a good basis for our economy. So these are the major lessons that I take for myself. Now it's, every country, it's different. You can't compare the Philippines with 110 million people and island state to Israel, which is small. But this is the lessons for a country such as Israel.
Well, I wanted to ask you also about, the political factor, because, we see in countries like the United States, even wearing masks, now convincing people to take vaccines, there's a political tone to that. And even here in the Philippines, the president, our president, is now threatening people to be arrested if they don't wear their mask. But that doesn't seem to be the case in Israel. Is that an accurate?
No.
Do people there trust the government more, or what? Is it cultural?
There was a big debate in Israel about privacy. Because they put out those apps. Let's say I met you and you were sick or you came, immediately you will be in quarantine. So there was a big, I was in Israel and then I saw people enter into quarantine because they were locating them through their cell phone. So there was a big issue what about privacy in Israel. So actually, in measures like this, in Israel, I never saw in Israel before in my life somebody wearing a mask. We don't have it in our culture. I know in some parts of Asia, even before COVID, people were. I never saw it in Israel. So a lot of challenges, and I can tell you that A lot was risk management, I would say. For example, in Israel, when you were exercising outside, also during COVID, people didn't wear masks because the assumption was you exercise, you're outside, you keep distance, it's only one or two people which are jogging, why to wear a mask? For example, something like this. Also, there is an issue of culture of discipline, and also Israelis are not, we are challenging. We are a mentality of wow, how and that was a challenge. There was a challenge, and the biggest challenge was fake news from the beginning. And here it was, I think, the issue was really to start a government campaign to fight fake news. That was one thing, but there's also people that were reluctant, especially at the beginning, to receive the vaccine because they are concerned. It's a new vaccine, it's legitimate, it's not fake news, it's totally different thing. And one of the things was a role model by the Prime Minister and President. They were the first to be vaccinated prime time to show an example, and then many celebrities and others. So it helped a lot. Still, there are people that are not vaccinated. And now what we see, it's the numbers are very low of new sick people, but it's mainly young people. It's the elderly one, which are more vulnerable, are vaccinated, almost 100% of them. So the young people, I hope now we can start vaccinating 12 to 16 years old, those that will be we can't force people to be vaccinated. You can't force in Israel, but you can give incentives, and that's what we are doing. So so far we are doing very well with the pandemic, even though we say I'm very cautious because we had 3 lockdowns, and we saw it. I was in Israel during the lockdown. It was quite a lockdown.
Wow. Well, Ambassador, maybe if I could shift for a minute and talk about your foreign policy with regard to Southeast Asia, and just help us understand, where does the Philippines and ASEAN figure in your foreign policy? What's our significance?
Okay, Israel, I think in the last 30 years we start pivoting to Asia. Everybody knows it. And in the last 5-6 years, we are pivoting to countries that were important for us, but the effort is much dramatic more. And Philippines, I think in Southeast Asia is probably at the top of the list. And what symbolizes it is the historic visit of President Duterte in September 2018 to Israel. Since then, the relations are booming. And I give you the best example. During COVID, it's time when foreign missions all over the world either squeezing or staying the same. We opened here in August for the first time in our defense attaché office in my embassy. In September, we have opened our economic and commercial mission here in Manila. And at the same month, we opened our honorary consulate for Mindanao, based in Davao City. Those events happening, one of them happens in 3 years, it's good. So it shows you the importance. The fact that PAL just announced again that they are will start flying to Israel later on this year. The first that the Israeli businessmen, all of them wants to return to the Philippines to do business, but I see the Israelis waiting to return to, the tourists are waiting to return. So Philippines is very important for us, and I want to take this opportunity to thank the 30,000 Filipinos OFWs in Israel, because during the pandemic, the most vulnerable one were the elderly people. And the Filipinos in Israel are only caregivers, and they took care of our most beloved people during this pandemic when the elderly couldn't see their children and grandchildren. So we are full of gratitude for the amazing work that they are doing, and they are part of our families. And thank you very much I want to take this opportunity to thank them from the bottom of our heart.
Thank you, Ambassador.